This is the bird for which this trail is named. It's called an Anhinga. We have two birds along this trail that kind of look like that. The double-crested cormorant, widespread bird in North America, a temperate species. If you live in this country and you've got big water by your house, big lake, coastline, or river, you have cormorants. And the Anhinga, which is a tropical bird with a slow metabolism, at least for a bird. And it has a microstructure to its feathers that allows it to get wet to the skin. Both these birds kind of look alike. They swim underwater, capture fish, they share the same space. But they're different in fundamental ways. The Anhinga, like I said, the feathers absorb water. It makes it very neutrally buoyant, so it swims underwater with great grace and ease. And when you see it on the surface, you don't even see its back like a duck. Its body stays submerged. All you see is its neck. Your initial reaction is look at that snake. Old timers, older timer than me, call them snake birds. So this is a tropical bird with a slow metabolism that gets wet to the skin. What do you think it's in danger of?
White?
It loses body heat, hypothermia. We see a lot of birds that spread their wings in the sun. They do it for lots of reasons. Sunlight kills germs, makes parasites move so the birds can find them and remove them. Maybe it just feels good. When you see an Anhinga doing it, there is something else going on. Long after that bird's dry, or even when it's dry, it will stick its back to the sun, spread its wings, and retain that posture to elevate its body temperature. Most birds don't have to do that. There's a couple of others that do. But the Anhinga does. So we have the Anhinga and the cormorant, a temperate species, a tropical species. They share the same habitat by and large. They eat the same food. They kind of behave in the same way, but they are different in fundamental ways. So let's keep going a little bit and see if we can find some Anhingas and anything else we see.
Keep your eyes open, folks. Winter they come here, and when summer where they go?
They might range a little further north, the Anhingas, maybe to South Carolina, up the Mississippi River, but they would not do well in Michigan or a place like that. They are tropical birds. They're here all year. But they like to come to this place this time of year because the water's falling and the fish are going to get concentrated. Yes.
Will they be moving around or they will be steady?
No, they move. They swim underwater.
Yes.
With great grace and ease.
Okay. So we will see something like snake moving.
Yes.
Okay.
If it's on the surface, all you see is its neck. But it just comes up to breathe. Then it goes back down to hunt. Alligator, guys, port side, close aboard.
Yeah, no.
As we would say in the Coast Guard.
Alligator.
Yeah.
Soft shell.
Yeah, it was a pretty big one.
This gator was here last night as well.
He's still over there, sitting there. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
He hasn't moved.
2 alligators, guys. There's another one over there, and there's one right there.
Yeah.
This is a treat. This doesn't happen all the time.
Well, the soft-bellied turtle was cool.
Yeah.
The soft-shelled turtle was really cool.
Right across the pond.
Yeah.
That's the real deal, guys. Nobody keeps them. Nobody feeds them.
So he's lucky I'm not going to catch him.
No.
Winter?
No, I think we see them more often in the winter because the water falls, they get concentrated, and in the winter they get cold, so they'll lay out in the sun along the trail. They don't do that in the summer. But I stop here for another reason, guys. I asked you when we first started, what do you think the Everglades would be like before you came here? I asked people, what do you think the water in the freshwater Everglades would be like? And the answer I get most often is dark, dank, and stinky. Look at it. It's like a mountain stream. Shouldn't be a surprise. It is just rainfall. Now, this water, as it falls, and there's no more inflow, and we get a lot more animals in here, turtles, fish, alligators, it will murk up some.
Right.
But this is the water of the freshwater Everglades, like a mountain stream.
Does the Park Service keep track of the gators?
The biologists do study the gators. There's no number for the number of them in the park, but they do study them to monitor population differences. And, you know, back in the 60s, we almost lost these animals. And I'll be talking about that. Today, they've recovered.
This alligator, is it sleeping? It is just static, it's not moving.
They have a very slow metabolism. It's a very cool day, so everything is slowing down in that gator.
Okay.
And they don't
Nap time.
need to eat near as much as a warm-blooded animal does, like us. They don't need to eat 3 times a day. Actually, when these alligators in the winter, particularly a little further north from here, their body temperatures get in the 70-degree range. They don't eat at all. They can go months without eating, without ill effect.
Like hibernation.
Can you tell a male from a female?
Not by looking at it. It's a good. Males grow faster than females at a certain point in their life. So if you see a 10-foot alligator, 3 meters or more, it's a good bet, not a perfect bet, but it's a good bet that it's a male. If you see one laying eggs, it's a real good bet it's a female. But you can't look at them and tell them apart.
Gotcha.
Guys, I have some overhanging trees down a little further. I want to stop there. We're going to talk about the grand forces that shape this place. We're not done with that yet. In fact, we're just starting.
Okay.
Zoom, zoom. We got something down here in my spot, something going on.
Is that the bird you were talking about?
No, that's a turkey vulture.
Okay. Oh,
A master of flight. It doesn't have to flap much. It can float on the air when all other birds are grounded on the limb of a tree. It's not one of our glamour species, but it is a master soarer. That is a great egret, guys, a common bird in the park. You'll see this time of year, you see them all up and down the road.
Okay.
And I'm going to let everybody just check that bird out real quick, get some pictures, and then we're going to do some more talking. Walking and talking, my specialty. Well, I can't compete with that bird.
A lot more audience.
Have to stretch our necks.
Y'all come on down here and sort of get over here. I want to talk to you. Like I told you, this is a science and nature program, and we're about to do some science and nature. I talked about the climate and its water as the heart and the blood of this ecosystem. I also mentioned it wasn't the first actor on the stage. When you look at this landscape, it looks flat to you. But it's not totally flat. If it was, it wouldn't look like this. We can see that patchwork, that rich mosaic of plant communities from right here. Tree line over there, tropical hardwood forest. Tree line in the distance, a swamp hardwood forest. A willow and pond apple thicket, and an open prairie. When we look at this mosaic of plant communities, we are looking at ups and downs, topography. And we need to understand where that topography comes from because it's really important. And to do that, I have to do a little geology. Now don't fade away on me. I'm going to keep it simple. You guys can walk through if you'd like.
Thanks.
Yeah, keep the trail open just a little bit, folks, so folks can come through. You know, as much as I'd like to own this trail, I don't. It belongs to everybody. So we need to do a little geology. 100,000 years ago, the last interglacial warm period, sea levels were higher than today, maybe about 25 feet, and South Florida was covered by a shallow sea. And like seas everywhere, there's some spots were a little deeper, some spots were a little shallower, and sediments were left on the bottom. About 80,000 years ago, give or take, the planet cooled off again, and the glaciers grew, using the water in the oceans to build themselves, and sea levels went way down. At their lowest point, 300 to 400 feet, 120 meters lower than today. Florida wasn't anything like it is today. The beach was 100 miles off Fort Myers. There was no Everglades. It was dry and windy. About 18,000 years ago, give or take, the planet started to warm back up again. The last in a handful of times over the last few million years, glaciers started to melt, sea level started to rebound. They came up really fast for a while, 6 to 7 feet, 2 meters a century. Talk about climate change. Nothing like that's happening today, at least not yet. But the Everglades wasn't here. Grab this bag. It was dry and windy and probably a little cooler. But the rock of the Everglades, the rock was exposed, the sediments, and they were turned to stone. And now at 18,000 years ago, the rock of the Everglades is in place. The first actor in the drama just walked out on the stage. Preserved in the rock was the shape of the sea bottom. And while the rock's been exposed for 80,000 years, it's been eroded, not mechanically by raging rivers and waterfalls, but chemically. This is limestone. Limestone is easily dissolved by acids. Rainfall is acidic, so given 80,000 years to work on the rock, superimposed on the shape of the sea bottom are holes and ridges and spires. And as the sea levels came up, the Everglades still wasn't here. But the rock was in place. The first actor in Grunwald's drama just walked out on the stage. It wasn't until about 5,000 years ago that the modern climate arrived. Not very long geologically, putting seasonal water across this landscape of subtle topography. Now the deeper spots in that ancient sea are now our low spots, and they stay wet all year, most years. We're walking to one right now. The shallower spots in that ancient sea are now our high spots, and they stay dry all year, most years. The pine forest, that hardwood forest, places in between like this prairie. And I'm only talking a range of elevation of 3 to 4 feet, meter and a half, 2 meters at the most, are wet in the summer, dry in the winter for varying periods. That much difference in elevation can make the difference between being wet 10 months a year and 4 months a year. Now here's the easy part when it comes to the plants and their communities. What grows where it's wet doesn't grow where it's dry, and vice versa. Plant communities that like to be wet a little bit don't do well where it's wet a lot. So when we look at this mosaic of plant communities, we are looking at the response of plants to the conditions set by the topography, most of it geological in origin, and the modern climate. Now, we've got the bone of the Everglades, the rock, the literal ground floor. We've got the heart and the blood, the climate and its water. We need one more thing to make an Everglades, and that's the breath, and it's fire. It's always been in the mix. It burns through these prairies once in a while, controlling the growth of swamp hardwoods. The pine forest that you see further down the road would be a hardwood forest in 25 years without fire. Well, that pine forest is still there. What does that tell you? Fire's always been one of these large-scale forces shaping this place. So in a very simple and fundamental way, the interaction of 3 large-scale forces, geology, climate, and fire, have in just 5,000 years sculpted the landscape you see before you right now. It's almost that simple, and all the biological complexity that we associate with this landscape has developed because of the conditions set by those simple interactions. Now, you guys know that I like these big forces by now, this big picture. I'm going to mention one more before we head out. Maybe not on the scale of geology, but it's a big one, and it's biological, and it's the alligator. I'm going to give you a hint as to its role. We'll talk more about it when we get further on. This old canal behind me was dug, 1914, 1915, 16. It's been deepened a little bit on both ends and widened out, but this is the original. It should have long since filled in with sediment. What do you think keeps it open? Or helps keep it open? Gators. They're like bulldozers in the dry season. Game trails, tidal creeks, and old canals. But that's just a hint. Their role in this landscape is much grander than that, but I'm going to save that until we get further out. Let's keep walking. We're going to go straight ahead and see if we can find more gators and maybe some nesting anhingas, and then we'll describe in a little bit more detail the very important role of this biological force, the alligator. Zoom, zoom.
These are old turkey vultures up there?
Yes, but I don't see any black vultures. They're pretty easy to recognize. Sometimes there'll be a hawk mixed in with them as well. So whenever you see they call that a kettle. According to our bird lady on our staff, she's great. She calls that a kettle. When you see a kettle of vultures, look, you may see some hawks. All right, let's keep going.
What is the white bird name? The white bird is
This guy up here? Yeah. It's a great egret.
a great egret.
Yeah.
The great egret. I probably don't know. He's so smart.
And it's hunting. It's looking for something. You know, I must mention that the birds on this trail somehow know that we're no threat. They see us passing, so you can get close to them like this. That same bird a mile down the road would not let you this close. That's one of the joys of this trail. Let's not crowd him too much. He does have some business to do.
Yeah, his head is always steady. Even his neck's moving constantly.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they do that.
He got some business to do.
He's got some business going on.
Don't be too close.
See how that grass is pushed down there? I call that a gator slide. They'll come out of there and come across the trail.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, there is an Anhinga nest with a bird on the nest, right back in there.
Oh.
Hard to
nest.
see.
I see that. 什么？一个窝，鸟窝。
There is a bird on that nest, but I don't see any in the trees. They're probably out hunting. But we got stuff to do here. Let's let our group catch up with us a little bit. Come on, y'all. I got more stuff. Alligators. Their role in the landscape. I gave you a hint. But I want to do something else first. I've already been asked, what is the difference between an alligator and a crocodile? Alligators belong to an order of animals called the crocodilians. That's 23 species. We have 2 crocodilians that call this park home. We know we have American alligators because we just saw one or 2. Who knows what the other one is? Somebody knows this. How about the American crocodile? Everybody wants to know the difference. And there are some differences in appearance. The American crocodile has a much more pointed snout than the alligator, as Miss Piggy calls them. I don't care how many cartoons you've seen in your life that show alligators as green. They're black, at least adults on their backs. Crocodiles are sort of dark gray, and when their mouths are shut, they still look really toothy, particularly that lower tooth that protrudes upward on the outside of the upper jaw. Alligators, black creatures that they are, when their mouths are shut, don't look near as toothy. If you see any teeth, it's top ones pointing down. Of course, when they open their mouths, that whole point is lost because there's a bunch of teeth going both directions. But the biggest difference between these 2 animals, and the one I find the most interesting, is the habitats they require, where they live. The American crocodile is a tropical animal, and it likes coastlines. It can handle salt water. So it's seen on the top of South America, the coast of Central America, Mexico, Hispaniola, Cuba, Jamaica, and extreme South Florida. But being tropical and liking coastlines, the only place we see that animal in this country is right along the coast of extreme South Florida or in the Florida Keys, with a rare anomalous exception or 2. You have a good chance to see them in Flamingo. There are some residents right in the marina. The alligators everywhere else. Now, we like to think of the alligator as representative of the crocodilians, I guess because we're used to them, but they're not. They're the oddball, the black sheep of the family. When somebody, big woodpecker. When somebody told all the crocodilians to sit down, the alligator stood up. It's the only one whose range, where it lives, is not partially or wholly included in the tropics. It doesn't live in Cuba. It doesn't live in Mexico. It lives in the coastal Carolinas, North Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. Everybody knows they're in Louisiana, Texas. How about Arkansas? Southeastern Oklahoma and the Red River. The alligator is not a tropical animal. It's a warm temperate species, and it's the only one like that. I do have to qualify that a tiny bit. There are two alligators on the planet, the American alligator and the Chinese alligator, about which little is known. It's maybe a little smaller. Its range is very restricted, and it's highly endangered. But it, too, is a warm temperate species. So alligators are different in a fundamental way than all of their 20-something crocodilian brethren. And I think it's really cool we've got that special and unusual crocodilian that calls the Southeast U.S. home. Now, they're rolling the landscape. I gave you a hint back there. When I was a kid in the late 50s and early 60s, you could not come out here and see alligators like you do today. They were almost gone. They were put on the endangered species list about as soon as we made that list. They had been hunted for decades and turned into belts, boots, and handbags almost quicker than they could make copies of themselves. And the biologists back then were asking, what's the Everglades going to do without the alligator? Well, I didn't know what they meant then, but I do today. Alligator has to have water to mate, to feed, and to regulate its body temperature. Now, I've talked about our dry season. So what do you suppose an alligator is going to do if he doesn't have a cool pond close by? Because they don't go far, as a general rule. When his stomach hits the dirt in January, he's got to have water, and his water's gone. What's he going to do? Swimming pool. Yeah, sometimes. It does happen. Yeah, they dig. They dig a hole. Water's never very deep in South Florida. That is the water tank. And it's not like every alligator says, hey, it's the start of the dry season, I got to go dig a hole. The whole landscape is pockmarked with gator holes. And like other aquatic things, they're pushed to the lower spots. They'll generally find an old hole. Maybe one they used last year. They will deepen it, widen it out. Could be one gator in a small little depression. Could be 10 or 20 gators in a bigger one. They'll dig it out, they'll deepen it, and they pile up debris around the edges. So it's higher, drier, and disturbed. That's important. Now the alligator's got his water, and he's happy. A lot of animals have to have water in the dry season, but they can't dig holes. So that hole fills up with fish, frogs, and turtles. Now the alligator's double happy. He's got his water, and he's got something to eat. And so do the birds and the bobcats and the raccoons. They also now depend on that gator hole. They've just created critical habitat for many animals in the dry season in their response to the dry season. And around the edges, where it's higher, drier, and disturbed, the plant community changes. So they've contributed to the botanical diversity of the landscape. The very way it looks to your eyes, the very patchiness of the plant communities. Now, if that's not enough for you, these animals have to do something in the wet season when they lay their eggs. And there's water everywhere, and the eggs have to stay dry. What's a poor gator to do? Well, the nest is a mound. It builds high ground. Red-bellied turtles, soft-shelled turtles, and some snakes will often find those high spots to lay their own eggs. The plant community changes, so the alligator, in its dance to the water cycle, has created critical habitat for many animals, wet season, dry season, and has actually colored the way the landscape looks to your eyes when you drive down the road. The alligator is what we call a keystone species, a species that has a disproportionately large role in the shaping and maintaining of an ecosystem. A biological force of large magnitude, and that's what the biologists meant so many years ago when they asked, what's the Everglades going to do without the alligator? Well, today we're not asking that anymore. They have recovered pretty much throughout their entire range, not that they don't have some problems in some places, but they are fulfilling their ecological roles from the Carolinas all the way around to Texas, including in Everglades National Park. So I want to walk a little further. We're going to walk through some pond apple trees with a lot of air plants. And I've got one little shelter further out. When we get out there, I want to do one more thing with you. I'm going to bring up one more large scale forest. This one is recent. It's biological. It's not pythons. And it's brought great changes to the landscape. Be thinking about what that might be. And let's keep going, and we'll regather again in a few minutes. And we'll talk about that last large scale forest. Zoom, zoom. Yes.
What prevents that today?
Well, they farm them today. So there's no economic incentive, and we have some pretty strict laws. Now, every state that does have a hunting season. It's highly controlled, highly regulated, short term. Every state's a little different, but yeah. Everybody okay? All right. That's important to me. Turtle. Oh yes, we like turtle. Soft-shell turtle. That turtle is a meat eater. Snails, worms, a dead fish. As opposed to most turtles that are herbivores. They eat vegetables. That's a funny looking turtle. It's got a pig-like snout and it can bite.
And then I saw like a big white fish, probably about this big.
Yeah, it's a blue tilapia. It's an African species.
Invasive or?
Yeah. Purple gallinule. It's a little marsh hen. It pads around on these lilies. Very colorful bird.
Very colorful. Yes.
Colorful. We may see another one. They're not uncommon out here. I heard it, but I never saw it.
And the blackbird over there, the couple of those just...
Cormorants.
Okay.
We haven't had a good...
Sitting on there.
Yeah, we haven't had a good view of an Anhinga to contrast them. Okay. The only Anhinga we saw was sitting on a nest. Double-crested cormorants, guys.
Oh, wow.
Oh, here's the bird.
I wish it was Anhinga.
Don't scare them away.
No, they're not going to go anywhere. They sit up there all day long.
Oh.
That's that gallinule.
So
There it is. That's a purple gallinule, guys. That is a very colorful bird. People like to see it. It's sort of a marsh hen. It's got a chicken's feet and a duck's body. Hadn't decided what it's going to be yet. They pad around on the lilies and eat insects and seeds.
they're walking on one.
They're walking on these things.
What did you say it was called?
Purple gallinule, Gallinule. A very sought after bird by birders. It's just, if the sun was out, you'd almost need sunglasses to look at it. It's that colorful. Wow. Iridescent purples and greens.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's a good looking bird. Guys, let me regather you up one more time. I want to do one other thing with you before I turn you loose, and then you can stand out here with these birds all day long if you want.
These are hairy?
Those are double-crested cormorants. They kind of look like an anhinga, and they do swim underwater to capture fish. We've talked about a lot of things. We've looked at the big picture of this landscape, what it is, what it isn't. We've talked about geology, climate, alligators. We can thank geology for this low spot. We can thank the modern climate for putting just the right amount of water here at the right time that brings the animals that bring us. When you drive down the road and you go through that pine forest, you can thank geology for that high spot. And you can thank fire for keeping the pine forest a pine forest.
There are some birds at the back. What are those?
The two birds.
Three.
Cormorant.
Three birds.
Right there.
Yeah.
Double-crested cormorants.
Oh.
They look like anhingas in a way,
Yeah.
but they're not. So far, we've been talking about the natural system, the way nature designed it. I want to mention one other large-scale forest. This one is recent, biological, and it's brought great changes to the landscape. What am I thinking about? Somebody knows this.
The grasses.
No. How about the coming of modern industrialized humans? So, a brief thumbnail history. When people first started getting here in any kind of numbers, about 1880, they considered this place worthless, an impenetrable swamp. But if they drained it, it would become an agricultural and a tourist mecca. So they started digging canals up around Lake Okeechobee. Those early canals did drain some of that, but those early canals just took water from one flood-prone area and put it into another. It was a lot harder to drain this landscape than the wizards of the day thought. In 1904, we elected a governor with the very distinctive name of Napoleon Bonaparte Broward. His whole deal was drain the Everglades. He talked about reclaiming the Everglades. I've wondered from whom or what he was going to reclaim it, because nobody ever took it. He was talking about claiming it for human use. And his whole deal was to drain the place. So canal digging took off with reckless abandon. Canals east and west of the lake and to the south. That went on for a couple of decades. And in 1928, a bad hurricane came in the Palm Beaches, went across Lake Okeechobee, sloshed some of the water out, and drowned several thousand people. Well, when we have problems with water in this country, we don't call Ghostbusters. We call the Army Corps of Engineers. They built a dike around Lake Okeechobee that forever cut it off as the natural headwaters to the Everglades. At the same time, the Tamiami Trail, Highway 41, great ride today, was completed across the state. That was a dam across the flow. That all-important water cycle to which everything dances was now being altered. Another couple of decades go by. More digging. 1947, the year this park was dedicated, 2 hurricanes impacted South Florida after an already wet year, and there was widespread flooding. Well, I don't care where you live. You don't like water in your house. So the Corps of Engineers came in again. This time a massive project, clearly visible on the satellite photo. Hundreds of miles of canals were dug. Levees were constructed. Pumping stations, flood control structures were installed all over the landscape. That all-important water cycle to which everything dances was now so altered as to be almost non-existent. The great historic rookeries at the tops of these Gulf Coast rivers, where thousands of wading birds nested every year, were abandoned in the 60s. Now that's a bleak picture, and I'm not going to leave it that way because there is better news. But I want to show you 2 images first that better illustrate what I'm saying. You've heard the expression, probably, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, if that's the case, these 2 images are an encyclopedia. That's the way the Everglades would have looked before we started digging. Everything south of the lake was Everglades. The park is just down here. If you don't think we've changed it, look at that.
Oh, big change. Look at the change.
Now,
history you can compute.
I don't want to be all doom and gloom because I don't feel that way. It's all about competing for water in South Florida. Urban development, agriculture, and the natural system. The natural system was pretty much ignored up until the 60s. But during that time, late 50s, early 60s, we started having a growing environmental consciousness in this country, really all over the world. Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, and we began to realize that the things that bring us to these places, our parks, were disappearing. It became a big deal. We had congressmen that ran on Save Our Everglades platforms. It was a big deal nationwide. That all culminated in the year 2000 when our Congress authorized, with only 18 dissenting votes, how often does that happen these days, what's called the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Program. Don't let the word restoration fool you. We're never going back to the 1880s. But if we get it right and get from here to here, it means we get to keep what we have. This project promises to provide water for all competing interests and to restore water in the Everglades to volumes closer to historical levels, and proper timing. Again, you need water in here in the wet season and not so much in the dry season, or else all the animals get confused. This is really complicated. In this project alone, there are 68 individual engineering projects. Largest environmental restoration ever attempted on the planet. And there have been new projects that surround this, such as addressing Kissimmee River Basin and Lake Okeechobee. It's complicated politically, environmentally, and economically. Who's paying? Some of it's been done with great promise. Some of those historic rookeries are being repopulated. Some of it's in progress. Do we have it right? We don't have a real good record. And some of it is wrapped up in politics, personalities, and dollars, as you might imagine. But I'm optimistic because the alternative is to do nothing, and I just showed you a picture of what doing nothing has meant. Now, I want to leave you guys with a couple of thoughts before I turn you loose. And I'm going to be around a couple of minutes when I'm done, in case you have any questions or just want to chat. Why do we come to these places? I bet everybody here likes parks, whether it's a little city park where you are with an old church and big trees, or a grand national park like this. We like them. I guess once in a while somebody's father-in-law gets pulled out here, really doesn't care, but it's a good bet that y'all like parks. We get something of personal value from these parks. It's different for each of us. You might be a science geek like me. You might be an artist looking for inspiration. I see families having unique experiences in novel settings. You might think it's spiritual. It actually can be all of those things. You don't even need to know what it is. You just know that you like parks. There's a reservoir of experience that we tap when we come to our parks. We have our straws in that reservoir right now, every one of us, and we're drinking. Now, it's different to me in the Grand Canyon than it is here. But my science buttons are pushed in both places. The spectrum of the experience is shifted a bit, perhaps. It may be turquoise to me in the Grand Canyon and blue here. What's coming through the straw may taste a little bit different to me here than it does in the Great Smokies. But it's the same reservoirs. And when we lose a park, and we do sometimes have to build an interstate highway, pave everything around the park so the park shrivels. You can't make these places, you can't buy these places, and when they're gone forever. I want to leave you with that. I want to recommend that you complete the trail. It's about as far back as we've come already. Those two alligators are probably still there. I want three things for you while you're in the park. I want you to be safe. Don't swim with the alligators. I want you to have a good time. And I want you to learn as much about the park as you can. Or as that you want to. You don't have to, of course, but I say it with good reason. When you're out western our geological parks, Grand Canyon, Yosemite, the scenery screams at you. You can't miss it. When you're in the Everglades, it whispers. The more you know about the place, the louder the whispers become. I hope you've heard a few. Folks, I love to do this. You gave me the chance, so I want to thank all of you for coming with me. Had you not been here, I guarantee you my boss would have had me doing something else that would have been near as much fun. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you. Very appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope you liked it. Hope you enjoy the park. Be safe. Keep your eyes open and your hearts.
Well said.
All right. I'll see you.